Okay. We have 3 candidates for local county office. The most important race is the county attorney race. We have an outstanding candidate with a background in environmental law. Her name is Cindy Toole. I understand she knows about the event. She's on her way. I wish she had been here by now. We will introduce her later. Speaking of candidates, we've got petitions here on the table. I've got petitions here in my hand. Those of you who haven't already signed, anybody who's registered green or independent, sign for these county candidates. Our second county candidate is Josh Riley, who's running for District 4 Board of Supervisors. Thank you. And our third candidate is a obscure office, Pima County Recorder, and that's yours truly. I'm running for Pima County Recorder. Thank you all. On Hill.
Well, I just want to mention that we have recruited several candidates, and they are prospective potential candidates, and they haven't officially filled out their filed their paperwork. But we've got myself running for state representative in LD 27, which is Central South Phoenix. We've got John Guy, who will be running for state rep in LD 20, Northwest Phoenix. Mark Salazar, who will be running for Congress against Trent Franks. Joe Kramer, who will be running for state rep in LD 24. Elisa Olea, who will be running for state rep in LD 21. Linda Macias, who will be running for state rep in LD 18. And we got a few other candidates that are thinking about it but haven't officially declared. So what we would really appreciate is if we had some Greens here in Pima County that would be willing to run for either state representative or state senator or for Congress. And we also have, there are some openings for the Corporation Commission. So if that idea appeals to you, to run for Corporation Commission, we would really appreciate it. So thank you.
Can I add one quick thing on Hill? Somewhere there's a sign-up sheet that's circulating around. Please sign in. We'd like to just document that you were here in support.
Great.
So in case you didn't know, this is our presidential candidate. She was our 2012 nominee for the Green Party of the United States from Lexington, Massachusetts, Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here in Arizona, where you are leading the charge in the fight for immigrant rights, in the fight for living wages, in the fight against violence, gun violence, and really in the fight for democracy for us all. So thank you so much for leading the way. It's really fun to be here. I'm sort of, I just got off the plane from Boston, where I just got off the plane from Illinois, where I just got off the plane from the Northwest and the East Coast, and it's so exciting that so much is going on right now. I don't know how much you're following the campaign, but we're having, just an unprecedented experience. As Greens, we've really been ahead of the curve for a long time on nonviolence, on a green economy, on equal marriage, on the rights of immigrants, on our global citizenship and our need to treat all of us with respect, on free public higher education, and on canceling student debt. On all of these things, we've been ahead of the curve, and the curve has caught up to us. So in this election, it's such a incredibly crazy and wonderful time. And by the way, I want to just be sure I give a proper thank you to Mike Cease, who's been driving me around, and to Libby, who's hosting me, yes, and being our videographer here, and also Angel and Maritza, who've done so much work to arrange the visit here, and to really all of you How many are a part of the Green Party? I'm just curious to get a sense. All right, and how many are here just new, coming to check this out? All right, that's really wonderful. I'm so glad to see that. And maybe this is like the biggest thing that I'm really witnessing. Having run 4 years ago, you know, I can really get a sense of what's different this time around. And we just, like, people are really coming out of the woodwork, and it's new people, and it's young people, and you know, and it's people who are fighting the battles of racial justice and immigrant rights. And it's so exciting to see that we have a real head of steam. You know, this election has been so crazy. A lot of people were expecting it. Many of us expected this to be, you know, same old with the Bushes and the Clintons. Hasn't exactly turned out that way. And I think one of the big surprises was the Sanders campaign. And in some ways, it's, what should we say, the media has like this much capacity to cover a progressive campaign. So it's been kind of focused on the Sanders campaign. But there's little doubt that the days are numbered for that campaign. The Democratic Party has a thing called the kill switch. I don't know about the kill switch, but they elected, or I should say they nominated George McGovern, you know, many years ago in 1972, a peace candidate who sort of got away with the nomination. And after that, the party changed its structure, so something as radical and progressive as that would never happen again. And that's when they created super delegates, which ensure that the party insiders basically control the margin of safety. And then they also control, well, they created the Super Tuesdays, which are these big election days that it's very hard to compete in if you don't have a whole lot of corporate money and super PACs and things like that. So, you know, and then they have their whole machine. They also do fear campaigns. You may remember the Dean scream. Anybody remember that from Howard Dean's race? And that just came out of nowhere and knocked him out of contention, sort of made him out to be, you know, a real lunatic. Jesse Jackson's campaign, which had won 12 Midwestern primaries on the strength of the civil rights movement. And he was basically attacked and made out to be anti-Semitic, I think because of some remarks he made about Israel, but it was a smear campaign, and he was brought down. You know, Dennis Kucinich, he got redistricted by the party. So the party has not become more progressive over the years. You know, as money and power have become consolidated into fewer and fewer hands, the parties have only gotten more and more powerful, more and more run by the people in the back room. And, you know, there's little doubt. The party tends to fake left by lifting up these appealing progressive campaigns, but while it fakes left, it moves to the right. And that's what it's done over the years. So there's little doubt about where this is going, and many of our supporters are actually Sanders supporters as well. And we say, you know, that's just fine, and more power to him for raising these issues, but it's very clear where this is going to go, and Bernie Sanders supporters are going to need a plan B at the end of the day, because they're not going to want to take everything, all this hard work that they've done, and funnel it right back into Hillary Clinton's campaign. And Bernie's already said he will support Hillary, he will work for Hillary. So it's really important. So while the media may be paying a lot of attention right now and their progressive space may be fairly occupied right now, that's not going to last forever. And even while that's going on, we're getting way more attention. We've been covered by CNN, by NBC News, C-SPAN, The Nation, you name it, as well as the more progressive media outlets, including Democracy Now! And Real News Network. I mean, even they have kind of become 24/7, the Bernie Sanders campaign report, but that will only go on for so long, and they have given us good coverage. There's no doubt that they will continue. I think they're just pushing really hard for Bernie right now, but that will, you know, come to the end of its time. In the meanwhile, what we're seeing and the kinds of energy that's building in the campaign, the kinds of turnout we're getting. We have thousands of volunteers who've signed up on our website. We've made matching funds, and a big thank you to the many people here in Arizona who helped us make matching funds. So I want to give you a round of applause. And matching funds basically means that for every dollar you contribute, the feds match it dollar for dollar up to like a $250 threshold, so which is huge. It basically doubles our money, and it enables us to be a really competitive campaign and to hit the ground running. We're expecting, we just qualified last month, so we're expecting an infusion of some cash from the feds, which is going to enable us to hire organizers, and we can start putting these thousands of volunteers to work. And it's a really great time, because there is this movement, the social movements, whether it's the living wage campaigns, or the fossil fuel blockades, or the movement for immigrant rights, for citizenship, for undocumented Americans who are the heart and soul of our communities and always have been. Yes, let's these campaigns are going strong, and we're seeing people stand up like we haven't seen in generations. People with gray hair may remember in the 60s, when the anti-war movement and the women's movement and the civil rights movement were going strong, and we were accomplishing, a lot. We brought the troops home, and got women's right to choose, and the Voting Rights Act, and we were really making progress, and Richard Nixon was just quaking in his boots and didn't dare to confront us. And under his watch, we passed the the Clean Water Act and established the EPA and protections for workers, the OSHA, for workers' health. So we haven't seen this since then. And what we're seeing now is it's remarkable. People are standing up. And not only are we standing up, but we're really not getting tunneled into fighting for just one thing. We're really beginning to look at the whole picture here and realize that we can't do this just on immigrant rights or just on, ending police violence and racism. We can't just do this on saving the environment or with living wages, My background is as a medical doctor, and you don't go to your doctor. Nobody ever came into my clinic and said, just take care of my kidneys, please, forget about my heart and my lungs and all the rest of me. We're whole people. We need all these things. And the system would love us to be divided and conquered. But people are really beginning to, act and to think and to stand up for all of what we need and not be satisfied with just little window dressing on the margins, a piece of legislation here, a little protection, environmental protection there. We really need deep systemic change. And so what people are, yes. People are calling for an America and a world that works for all of us.
Right.
And we in the Green Party are really lifting that up. You won't hear that from any other candidate in any of the mainstream parties. They're talking really about more American exceptionalism to different degrees, but they're talking about America first. And unfortunately, that means screwing, the other economies around us. It means, a foreign policy based on total economic and military domination, and all these other things that just aren't working. So we'll have some questions when I get through it. Thanks. Let me lay things out first, and then we'll have some time for back and forth. People have really begun to call for a more holistic solution. And what that does is enable us to all get together, because if it's a solution that works for everybody, then, it's everybody in, nobody out. We're working together, and we're absolutely unstoppable. Just a quick word about the crisis that we're facing, because, people know it, and I think it's important to just acknowledge that this is a crisis of our economy, of our ecology, of peace and security, and democracy. And that's why we need, a really a system change. We need a deep system change here. We're not going to fix this around the margins. And that's not going to come from political parties that are funded by predatory banks, by fossil fuel giants, and by war profiteers. That's what the big political parties are. And they may have different lip service, and they may tell you that they're going to do the right thing, and they may even try to do the right thing. And I do believe Bernie Sanders has integrity. He's really trying to do the right thing. He's been trying for quite a while up there in that den of iniquity in Congress. And you can see how far he's gotten, because that system is not going to budge. We really, in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And this is why we have an independent political party that does not take the corporate money, and we are the only ones. So give yourself a hand on that one. Back over history, it's always a social movement that changes things. That was the driver in the rise of the rights of working people, of labor, in the women's movement, certainly, over and over in the abolition of slavery. It was a social movement, but it also had a political voice. There was the Abolition Party, and that passed its agenda up to another independent third party called the Republican Party at that time. So when people say, oh, third parties, they don't count. Well, actually, it's exactly the same. I should say it's exactly the opposite. Without third parties, you don't have forward progress. It took a political challenge to move each of those social transformations. So that's why we stand strong and we stand proud as Greens. People sometimes say, well, why don't you run as an independent? You'd have such a better chance, without that baggage, of that naughty Green Party, Well, they will always disparage whatever organized threat, like the Black Panthers, back in the day, the parties of labor, the socialist parties and the progressive and the farm labor. They're always disparaged because we create a political threat. Without that political threat, you will be written off. Nothing matters. No matter how hard you're working out there in the street, you will be discounted if you don't also fight that fight in the halls of power and in the voting booth. That's why we're doing what we're doing, and thank you to the Green Party here for making this happen. So, yeah. A quick word about the depth of the crisis. They say we're in a recovery. Anybody think it's a recovery? No. Yeah. It's not recovery in any place I've visited yet. It's really more, you could better describe it as an emergency, not a recovery. And, oh, thank you. That's great. The jobs that have come back are low wage, part-time, temporary jobs. Wages now, average wages for workers are barely above the poverty level. It's really astonishing. Household wealth has been slashed by about 40%. And if you are a person of color or Latino, far worse, because that's where the mortgage crisis hit hardest, where the predatory loans were inflicted on communities of color. So that community wealth has absolutely been decimated. An entire generation of young people is locked in debt with no prospects for getting out in the current economy. And the Democrats and Republicans talk about renegotiating that debt and maybe limiting the amount that you have to pay at any particular time, and maybe you'll only be in debt till you're 40 or 50 years old, It's like spend your entire life paying back that debt. Black lives are on the firing line. Millions upon millions of undocumented Americans are at risk for deportation. And meanwhile, we are spending the majority of our discretionary dollars on these wars for oil that are blowing back at us with failed states, with mass refugee migrations, and with worst terrorist threats. This is absolutely a catastrophic policy. We'll talk about that in a minute and how we can fix that. And in the meantime, the wealthy few are richer than ever. It's now 62 billionaires that have the equivalent of half the world's population worth of wealth. 62 people have what 3.5 billion people have. This is crazy. And the political elite that is working hand in glove with them is actually making things worse. They're not making it better, spending trillions of dollars on wars for oil, Wall Street bailouts, and tax breaks for the wealthy. So the American people are in revolt. We know this. The latest Wall Street Journal poll, by the way, says 50% of people have divorced the Democratic and Republican parties. 50%. So we are now the largest group, are either independent or members of small parties. Democrats are 29%, Republicans are 21%. This is why we need to open up the debates, because by limiting the debates to just Democrats and Republicans, they've actually locked out the largest group of voters. So we're going to keep fighting. We've got 2 court cases. You can sign up at our website. We'll be undertaking actions to try to have some exciting, challenging things happening out there in the street. And it will be happening all over the country. So you can, again, sign up at jill2016.com. So most people are in revolt right now. And what this means is we not only have the solutions to solve this stuff, we actually have the numbers that it takes to turn it around. They want us to think that we are the lunatic fringe, that we're just like the minority that nobody pays any attention to. And if I can just tell you a quick experience, and this is what kind of got me hooked on politics, which I got tricked into, actually, at the young age of 50. So most of you who are here are like way ahead of me in understanding how the game works. I was one of those people. I was very, put off by the Democratic and Republican parties, so I didn't want to have anything to do with politics as usual. And as a doctor in the clinic, I was looking at this rise in asthma and learning disabilities and autism and cancer and diabetes and obesity and saying, well, we didn't used to have this. This isn't our genes. So I began to work with communities and with organizing groups to try to change some of the drivers of this, everything from air pollution to poverty to community violence to a sick food system. There were things that we could change and actually create a whole lot of jobs in the process. And lo and behold, we could present the legislature with a great solution that would create jobs and improve our health and the environment, but they wouldn't have any part of it because their campaign donors didn't want that. Anybody had that experience with your legislature, with your elected officials? Yes, I think. Anybody who's done any lobbying in the legislature? Well, if you have, you would know this is the way it works. This is just how it works. Anyhow, at that point, many of us got together in Massachusetts. We created a big coalition. We got the money out of politics through a voter referendum. We created public financing. And what do you think happened? We passed it by a 2-to-1 margin as voters because the legislature wouldn't touch it. And this was, by the way, progressive Democratic Massachusetts that controlled 85% of the legislature was Democrats. They wouldn't pass this. And when we passed it as voters, what did they do? They repealed it on a voice vote in a Democratic Party caucus of the legislature. So that said to me, this is not going to get fixed inside of the political parties of the establishment. And right about that time, I got tricked into running for office against Mitt Romney for governor in Massachusetts. And having no idea what I was getting into, I said, sure, why not try running for office? Everything else has failed. Might as well try that. But what I discovered was that there's just this incredible hunger out there for, a politics that's different, that's of, by, and for the people. We fought our way into a debate, and this was the main point I wanted to convey. We fought our way into a televised debate because even then people were tearing their hair out listening to this new form of torture called presidential debates. And inside the TV studio, and there was no audience, so it was just candidates and a moderator. And I gave voice to our usual Green Party agenda: the right to a job, the right to a living wage, the right to health care as a human right for everyone, the right to quality education that teaches to the whole student for lifetime learning, not to a high-stakes test that pushes people down the school-to-prison pipeline, cutting our military budget, which isn't making us more secure, it's making us less secure, and putting our dollars into real security here at home, in schools and housing and health care and things like that. And all of that, you can imagine, went over like a lead balloon inside this little debate studio with just the candidates and the moderator. Nobody even bothered to rebut those ideas. They were such lunatic ideas. But when I walked out of the debate to where the press was waiting, I was like shocked because I got mobbed by the press for the first time and the last time. After that, they were forewarned, never pay attention to that woman. And anyone, actually, of a green or socialist nature, ignore them, they do not exist. Because if we recognize them, you know what? They are going to have the power. But what they told me when I got mobbed was that I had actually won the debate on the instant online viewer poll. That this whole thing really was a scam. I mean, suddenly it's like the light went on in my head, and I realized that we're made to feel like we are the outsiders, like we're the lunatic fringe. But in fact, we are not. We are really the heart, the soul, and the conscience of the human beings who actually do populate this country. We're not all those most of us have a heart, and have connections and held community values. You won't hear them on the corporate media, and you won't hear them in the establishment political parties. But, there it was. And truth to tell, in poll after poll, these are the issues that people support. They do support this basic agenda that we hold as the Green Party. So what I'm getting at, basically, is that we really do reflect the values and the solutions that people are clamoring for. And here's the most important news of the night, is that we actually have the numbers in a form that we could organize. People say to me, do you really think you're going to win? And what I say to that is, I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not ruling it out either, because, these are really amazing and remarkable times. All kinds of statistically unlikely things are happening. But here's what I want you to take home. What I want you to take home is that there are 43 million young people right now, and not so young people, who are locked into predatory student debt. 43 million. That is a winning number. That is a plurality of the vote in the three-way presidential race. That's enough to actually win the race. 43 million. And it just so happens there is only one candidate who will be on the ballot in November who wants to cancel student debt, and that's us. What that means, and by the way, let me just say my piece here quickly about student debt, because people are guilt-tripped all the time. Young people are guilt-tripped about student debt and told that, you made a bargain, you got to keep it. Well, actually, that bargain got broken. Right. That bargain was broken by Wall Street, and it was broken by our electeds, our misleaders in Congress who bailed out Wall Street. They bailed out the crooks who committed waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street and crashed the economy. Well, if they could spend $16 trillion, and I don't exaggerate, that's from the General Accounting Office. If they could spend $16 trillion bailing out Wall Street, how about we bail out the victims of Wall Street? It's way less money, and it's not just good for young people in debt. It's actually good for the whole economy, because that that student debt has been bundled into these investment instruments, which are also at high risk for crashing because there's high rates of default. People cannot pay it. Why can't they pay it? You know, it's because society broke its side of the bargain. You know, the bargain was you work hard, you do the work, you get your degree, and then you're going to have a good job. Well, the good job part, you know, fell through.
Yeah.
So that contract has been canceled. So it's time to actually cancel the contract. It will be good for our economy. It will be a stimulus package like none other, because then suddenly young people, instead of pouring their hard-earned earnings back into debt, they turn it into the economy, you know, and they recycle that money. And it becomes a stimulus to our local communities and all the rest. So this is good all around. And the other good piece of news about this is that this is something that the president actually has relative autonomy over. It doesn't have to go through Congress. How is that? You know? Yeah. So that is because the Federal Reserve decided to declare a state of emergency and issue this quantitative easing for Wall Street and for the banks. Quantitative easing, they did it to the tune of like $3 or $4 trillion, way more than what students need, which is like a little over $1 trillion. So if they could declare that emergency for Wall Street, they can declare this emergency for an entire generation and society that depends on that younger generation and their leadership in the economy and just re-envisioning our future. And it just so happens that the president appoints the Fed. So this is how we connect the dots, and this is why we're making this pitch that friends don't let friends stay home on November 8th. Everybody comes out to vote, especially if you are in debt or if you know someone who's in debt. If friends don't let friends who are in debt stay home, we win this election. I mean, we could actually turn politics on its head. They don't want you to know that. They don't want you to spread that word, but the reality is that we actually have the potential to move from A to B to C and all the way down the line here and bring out a generation of people and give them a reason to vote, because 80% of young people stayed home in 2014 and they don't need to. There's a reason to come out now. Who wouldn't have stayed home when you have two predatory parties who've basically thrown you under the bus? And the younger generation is, you know, especially being thrown under the bus because they're getting hit hardest on jobs, on the high cost of education, on this unique predatory form of debt that you cannot get out of come hell or high water. There's no getting out of that debt, no getting bankrupt out of that debt. It follows you, you know, to your grave. And through your Social Security and all the rest. So we can end that debt and, you know, open up the future for young people, but it's a future of justice. So it's not only justice on debt, it's racial justice, it's environmental justice, it's justice for workers, and it's peace. So we can bring that whole agenda into the voting booth on November 8th and totally turn the future around. I'll just say a couple more words quickly about the politics of fear, because we're all going to have to speak to that. You know, whether it's Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or whoever it is, the screws are going to be on, you know, that are telling you, oh, you can't stand up and vote for your values. You have to vote your fears. So it's important to speak to that. I mean, anybody heard that? Yes, okay, so you're all bombarded with it. We all are all the time. And there are many ways to respond to that, you know, and you can try them out, but I wanted to at least share a few with you, because that's basically, it's a fear campaign. It's an intimidation campaign intended to scare you out of challenging power, because we do have the power. So they've got to try to block us from using it. And this is what they've been doing for a while. But the reality is, this politics of fear It tells you to silence yourself. It's actually delivered everything we were afraid of. Look at the track record here. All the reasons you were given why you had to vote for the lesser evil. Because you didn't want our jobs being shipped overseas, right? Because you didn't want our wages going down and workers being, exactly, and workers' rights being taken away. You didn't want immigrants deported. You didn't want Wall Street to get these ginormous bailouts. You didn't want the meltdown of the climate. You didn't want healthcare costs to skyrocket. You didn't want these massive expanding wars and the attack on your civil liberties. Those are all the reasons we hear all the time. But that's exactly what we've gotten. Even under a Democratic White House, which had 2 Democratic houses of Congress for 2 years. What did they do? They gave away the store to Wall Street. So say no to that propaganda. Not only that the politics of fear delivers everything we're afraid of, but it also tells you to be silent. And silence is not a political strategy. If we can't stand up and say what we're for, we're not going to get it. And the other piece of this is that the lesser evil actually paves the way to the greater evil. And this happened after Obama's election, when he turned out to be such a lesser evil president. You know, what did people do? They decided to vote instead for the greater evil. And first, the House of Representatives flipped from a blue house to a red house, and then the Senate did. And the same thing happens in state after state. I just came from Illinois, where they have this horrific Republican governor. And why did he get elected? Because the Democrat before him was awful. Labor wouldn't come out and vote for him. The usual Democratic base would not come out and support the lesser evil candidate. So there's no getting away from this. It's not like the lesser evil is going to stop the greater evil. The lesser evil actually paves the way to the greater evil. So the bottom line is, you know, the clock is ticking. We have a climate that is in collapse. You know, the economy is on the brink again. The banks only got bigger, more leverage, took on, you know, more outrageous risk, playing with our tax dollars and now our bank accounts as well, you know, which are going to be bailed in now. Not only are they going to have a bailout, they're also going to do the bail-in. I mean, all this is happening even though they passed the Dodd-Frank Act, you know, whatever it is, 1,000 pages or something, but still, we are in worse shape than we were, according to innumerable experts on Wall Street. So the clock is ticking. This is sort of the Hail Mary moment, especially if you look at the climate. We only have so long to fix this. Latest science says that in a couple of decades, we could see civilization-wrecking events happening, including the breakup of the ice sheets, the collapse of the marine food chain, you know, not to mention drought and famine and skyrocketing food prices. You know,
it's already happening.
And it already is happening. And same is true, you know, for the wars. The Democrats, you know, Hillary Clinton is as much a warmonger as any of them. And I'm sorry to say, Bernie Sanders isn't exactly standing up to that either.
That is right.
And supports really you know, what's his solution to Syria? It's set the Saudis loose. But unfortunately, the Saudi monarchy is the problem. They're not the solution. They are funding, according to Hillary Clinton's own emails as Secretary of State, the Saudis are still the major funder of jihadi Sunni terrorism all around the world. And we just sold them $100 billion of weapons so that they can distribute these weapons. We're turning out to distribute these weapons too. It's kind of, you got to read very carefully, but even the New York Times just did an article in January about this, about how the US, the CIA, and the Saudis have been collaborating since Afghanistan and the Mujahideen. We created that with the Saudis. We created international jihadism. We funded it. We recruited for it. We armed it, and we helped train it. And that was Afghanistan, which led to the Mujahideen. It helped make the Taliban very powerful. And from there, Al-Qaeda grew out of that. And then we created ISIS, basically out of the chaos of Iraq. So this foreign policy of domination has created failed states and more terrorism, not less terrorism. So the bottom line here is that we can't keep doing this, and all they're advocating for more of the same, just more of it. Well, actually, we already spent $6 trillion on this war on terrorism, which is basically a war for oil. It only creates more terrorism. We spent $6 trillion. We killed 1 million people in Iraq alone, not winning us the hearts and minds of people in the Middle East. Not to mention killing and wounding tens of thousands of U.S. servicemen and women. So we can't go on like this. That's why we call it the Hail Mary moment. It's like speak now or never hold our peace. We got to stand up and turn this around now, but we can stand up because we do have the numbers, we have the power, we have the solutions. And I should just mention briefly, the Green New Deal would solve both the crisis of the economy and the climate in one fell swoop, and it would make the friggin' wars for oil obsolete. Which is how it pays for itself. It's not that we can't afford it. We can't afford not to do it. It pays for itself in the reductions in the military budget that it allows. It also pays for itself in its health benefits. Because we get so much healthier from eliminating the pollution. We get so much healthier that our health expenditures go way down, and that alone turns out to be enough to actually pay for the Green New Deal in and of itself. So this is a win-win-win. We can actually create an America and a world that works for all of us. It's not rocket science. It just takes seizing the promise of democracy and insisting that we stand up. In the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without that demand. We need to stand up and make this happen. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. Yeah. We have it. We're going to use it. And we're going to get as far as we can go in this race. I urge you, I'll give you one more slogan here. It's to reject the lesser evil, stand up and fight for the greater good. That's what you say when they tell you. You say, go to our website, join the team. We're just beginning to organize. We're trying to set up chapters in campuses, particularly, to help organize and mobilize this. This army of 43 million young people in debt, because that's really always where social transformation comes from. So if you are at a campus, be sure to sign up on a volunteer form or on one of the sign-up sheets here. Just make sure I have your contact info, because we would love to come. I'd love to come to your campus. We would love to help you get jump-started and help you get the word out. It's like we've got the matching funds, we've got amazing political parties like what we have going on here with the Arizona Green Party and the Pima County Green Party. We're building that infrastructure. We're in this for the long haul. However far we get, we are that much more ready for the next time. If 43 million young people come out, we are turning the White House into a greenhouse. And hold on to your hat. Well, you know what? We have a jump start on that transformation, which is going to happen. And when we get together, we are unstoppable. We are going to make an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. Together, we are going to make that happen. Thank you all so much for being here today.